Hey guys! In today's video I bring you an incredible and completely unusual story. Let's meet Rick Coleman, a Texas firefighter who was literally struck by lightning and pronounced dead for almost 2 minutes. But what happened while he was on? The other side will challenge everything you believe about death. He returned with a message that could change the way you see life and what comes after it. So leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this, and write in the comments which city you're watching. Now take a deep breath and prepare yourself for this shocking, spiritual, and absolutely real journey. My name is Rick Coleman. I have 42 years, and I'm a firefighter in the state of Texas. I've saved a lot of people in situations that defy logic, but nothing but prepared me for what I experienced last summer. I died standing up with my eyes open, and I discovered a truth that goes against everything you believe about death. It was August. We were experiencing an insane heat wave. We had just contained a forest fire in the mountains near Austin, and I was exhausted, dirty, sweaty, shaking with adrenaline. When everything seemed under control, I received a call on the radio. An elderly woman trapped inside her house after lightning struck the area. Time turned around in the blink of an eye. Black sky, deafening thunder. Something in the air told me that this was going to end badly. I arrived at the location with my partner Mike. As soon as I got out of the truck and approached the porch, the sky exploded. Literally. One white flash hit me in the chest like a cosmic sledgehammer. There was no time to think, to pray, to run. I felt my heart stop. Everything slowed down. The world was silent. I was thrown backwards. And at the same time, something in me was thrown forward. I opened my eyes. He was standing. But the floor was different. The air seemed to be made of liquid glass. I saw everything around me, but it was as if the world was vibrating at a frequency that didn't belong to me. And then I saw myself. My body lying on the floor with Mike giving desperate heart massage. It was at that moment that I realized I was dead. But the most shocking thing, I didn't feel afraid. No pain, just a stranger total clarity, like my brain was finally working, at 100%. And a certainty screaming inside me. Death is not the end. Not by far. I looked at my body like someone looking at a forgotten coat. I was still me. My mind, my memories, my sense of humor, everything was there. Only free. Free from the flesh. And then something even more bizarre happened. I was standing outside my body, watching my partner trying to revive me, and everything felt so insignificant. I don't say this coldly, but with an absurd perspective. It was as if I was watching a movie that I already knew the ending of, and that ending wasn't what everyone thought. The physical world was still there. I saw everything. The distant flames in the bush, the reflection of the truck's blue light on the stopped cars, the sweat on Mike's face. But what no one saw, and which I now saw with brutal clarity, it was a hidden layer behind all this. A second world, intertwined with ours, made of energy, light, and presence. And it wasn't just that. Behind Mike, there was luminous shapes, like shadows made of liquid light. They had no faces, but I felt what they were. They were guardians, observers. One of them turned to me and without speaking said to me, "You already know, you always knew." At that moment I understood that my consciousness was not in my brain. She was never. I was something outside the flesh, out of time, who just inhabited that body like a driver enters a racing car. And now that the car had broken down, I just got out of it. I remembered my wife, my children. I thought I would feel longing, despair. But no. What I felt was a shattering peace, the kind that breaks the soul into 1,000 pieces and glues them back together with pure love. Was still me, and at the same time, much more. I floated above the place and saw my city in a different way. It was as if every building, street, car, and person was surrounded by a vibrant fog. I saw emotions as colors: fear, sadness, joy, hope. It was all visible, and it was indescribably beautiful. Suddenly I realized that someone was calling me, but not with a voice. It was as if reality was pulling me, like a gigantic magnet pulling my soul towards something beyond. And that's when the known world dissolved at once. I was about to cross the threshold between what we think we know and what really exists. When everything around me dissolved, it was like crossing an invisible membrane, a kind of absolute silence barrier. Suddenly there was no more Texas, no more firefighters, no more sky or ground. There was just vibration. It was like falling into the center of a frequency. I no longer had a body, but I still had identity. And no, I wasn't floating in the void. I was inside something vivo. Imagine being immersed in an ocean of liquid light, which whispers and sings at the same time. A light that is sound, feeling, consciousness. All of that had an intelligence of its own. And she knew me. I recognized myself. In some way I can't explain, the light knew every detail of my life, even the thoughts I hid from myself. She didn't judge me, but she showed me everything. Suddenly my whole life began to play before me, but not like a linear film. It was like I could feel again every choice I made, every time I made someone laugh, every tear I caused, every moment I chose fear over love. And I felt it too, what other people felt because of me. It destroyed me inside. It made me fall to my knees, even though I didn't even have knees anymore. That's when I realized there wasn't an old god with a beard judging me. I was judging myself, and not with guilt, but with overwhelming clarity. A feeling of, now I understand everything. That light, that presence, she asked me without words. Do you want to continue or go back? The answer should be obvious, right? But it wasn't. Even though that place was the forever home, there was something unresolved in me. My children, my wife, an unfinished mission that I didn't even know existed. At that point, I understood the most shocking truth of all. Death is not the end. Not a rest. She's just a transition, a portal, a change of perspective. And no one dies before their time. The light enveloped me in indescribable warmth. For the first time in my life, I felt completely loved, completely accepted, even with all my flaws. And that's when everything went dark again. But this time, it wasn't the end. It was the return. The darkness came like a wave, thick and heavy, and for a moment I thought it was the end of that transcendental experience. But then I heard shouting, human voices, agitation, sounds of the physical world. I opened my eyes. The pain hit me like a blade through my chest. The smell of smoke, the metallic taste of blood and ozone, the entire body pulsing as if it were short-circuited. I was back. But something was missing. I still remember the first sentence that came out of my mouth. I wasn't supposed to come back. My voice was hoarse, weak, but filled with a certainty that would never leave me. Mike held my face, his eyes wide with fright. I've never seen him like that. A man accustomed to death, and now faced with something he couldn't explain. You died, Rick. You were blacked out for almost 2 minutes. I saw you leaving, man, he said, his voice shaking. I tried to sit up, but my body was screaming. I was alive, but I felt like a guest in a borrowed body. Part of me was still in that other place, in that light, in that field of love and truth. Over the next few days, the penny began to drop. I looked at people on the street and saw layers around them. They were not visions in the sense of ghosts, but visceral intuitions, as if I felt your pain, your regrets, your hidden fears. And the craziest, I saw potentials, paths not taken, choices that could change everything. But nobody saw that. I Tried to explain to my wife what had happened, but how can I put into words a dive into eternity? How to explain that death is just to awaken to what has always been there, invisible to the eye but present in every sigh? The worst thing was looking in the mirror and seeing my face, knowing that this isn't really me. The consciousness that returned to that body was no longer the same as the one that inhabited it before. It was as if I had left a piece of my old self to die, and whoever came back carried it back. The memories of two different worlds, and along with that, a silent mission. Show the world that everything we have been taught about death is wrong. Death is just the first step. In the days following my return, I realized that the experience had left me invisible marks. Not in the body, although my chest was still burned from the electrical discharge, but in the soul. It was like my brain had been reprogrammed. I heard thoughts before people spoke. I felt the intentions behind the words. Sometimes it was enough to look into someone's eyes to know what they most wanted to hide from themselves. I thought I was going crazy. But then came the dreams. But they weren't dreams. It was as if every night I would go back to that other place. Sometimes it was just a distant light, sometimes a voice telling me, "It's not over yet." Other times I felt that same river of energy enveloping me, as if I was preparing for something. And that's when I understood. I didn't come back, by chance. I was sent back with a task. That night I had one of the strongest visions. I dreamed that I was in a room made of pure light, and around me were dozens of people, but not physically. They were like consciousnesses vibrating at different frequencies. Some I recognized. An old childhood friend who died in an accident. A woman who I had helped in a fire, but who didn't survive. A baby, wrapped in a pink glow. Everyone looked at me with a kind of love that we don't experience here. A love without conditions, without possession, without judgment. One of them approached, not with words, but with pure presence, and showed me something. I saw Earth, but not as a physical planet. I saw it as a great school of lights in constant movement, and every human being was a spark with purpose, even if it was completely lost on the surface. And then the message came, clear, as if it had been written, in fire in the center of my being. Pain is part of the journey, but death is never the end, it is the portal home. I woke up in tears. That morning I sat on the porch and cried for a whole hour, unable to explain to my wife what was happening. I was no longer just a firefighter, a father, a husband. I had seen behind the veil. I knew that every choice we make here echoes beyond life. From there, I never looked at anyone the same way again. I began to realize that many live as if they were dead, trapped in a false idea of what they are, what life is, and especially what death is. But I've been there, and I can say, looking into your eyes, death is not what you think. She is more alive than life. Waking up every day after having died. It's strange. Do you realize that they will never be normal again? Nor should they be. The Rick who was struck by lightning was a man who believed in fixed rules: be born, work, die. The Rick who returned sees things where others see emptiness, or better yet, feel it. I started to notice patterns. People who contacted me after the accident, apparently by chance, but who were dealing with grief, fear of death, existential crises. And without understanding how, I knew exactly what to say to them. Sometimes I didn't even need to talk. Just listen. On one occasion, a woman stopped me in the supermarket. She looked at me with wide eyes and said, You have a light around you." She started crying right there. I had never seen her in my life. She told me that she had lost her son in an accident and had begged God for a sign. And at that moment she said I was the sign. It was scary and beautiful at the same time. Other times I would wake up at 3 a.m. with someone's name in my mind. And the next day, that person told me that they were going through the worst night of their life. It was like a part of me was still there, connected to that higher dimension, and she would pull me back when someone needed it. I started writing everything down, stories, feelings, visions, but not to understand. I already understood. I wrote so I wouldn't forget, because the world has a way of pulling you back automatically, and I knew that if I let this fade away, I would be denying the most powerful gift I have received. Until one night, everything changed again. I was alone at home, the TV off, the house in silence, and then I felt her presence. The same light, the same energy. It was as if a part of the other side had crossed over to visit me. It wasn't a spirit, it was love itself. And he said something to me, straight to the soul. You didn't come back to survive. You came back to wake up those who still sleep. There I knew. This story, as crazy as it may seem, it wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone. Because we're all going to go through this, we'll all go home. But first, we have the chance to live with your eyes open. Death split me in two, but it was through the crack that the light came in. As the weeks went by, one question kept coming to my mind. Why me? Why go back? I was not a saint. I was never religious. My life was action, adrenaline, heavy routine. But the more I thought, the more something inside me whispered, it's not about merit, it's about mission. And the mission wasn't to save bodies from the fire, was save consciences from darkness. I began to review my entire life through a different lens. Discussions that I found banal, words that I threw without thinking, silences that hurt those I love. And at the same time, small gestures, a smile, a hug, and I'm here, that had a cosmic weight in the invisible scales of existence. A life as I knew, it wasn't real the way we thought it was. She is a spiritual simulation, a testing ground, a sacred stage where the soul disguises itself as human to learn the only lesson that matters. We are eternal, but we forgot on purpose. And the pain, the loss, death, all these things are tools, not punishments. They tear the veil. They force the soul to look at itself, because without it, we would continue sleeping. I realized that the greatest tragedy is not dying, and live without knowing why. The light that enveloped me on the other side showed me that there is no divine punishment. What exists is learning, choices, paths, some harder, some softer, but all leading to the same place, back to the source. And do you know what impressed me the most? They weren't the flashes of my life, nor visions of the future. It was the moment I understood, with every atom of my soul, that no one is alone. There is always someone with us. Always. Even when you feel like you're at rock bottom. Even when you lose everything. Even when you think about giving up. There is something there. A silent presence that loves you more than you think you are worthy of being loved. After that, I could never see a stranger as just someone else. Again. Each person is a universe walking. A walking miracle trying to remember who he really is. And now that I remember, I can't stay silent. After everything I've experienced, I learned to listen to life more carefully. The silence began to speak to me, and not with words, but with presence. That presence I felt on the other side, the living love, the supreme consciousness, she never left. I just needed to almost die to finally see it here. One day, sitting in the garage, watching my son draw with chalk on the floor, I had a moment of clarity that made me cry right then and there. I saw, with a certainty that cannot be explained, that eternity is in every moment, in the way he held the chalk, in the sound of the wind in the leaves, in the smell of wet earth after the rain. All of this is God. We look for answers in temples, books, gurus, but the truth was hidden in the ordinary, not now, because the separation between the physical and the spiritual never existed. It was just a trick of conscience, a veil of illusion, so that We could to choosy, and when you choose, and everything changes. I saw my work as a firefighter with different eyes. It wasn't just about putting out fires, but about remind people that they matter, that their lives have value, that every second here is a sacred opportunity. I saw my wife with soulful eyes. Her every smile carried the reflection of the light that enveloped me there. Each hug was a piece of heaven visiting earth. And as for the people I lost, I felt them closer than ever. This is what I understood. Death does not separate. She just changes the channel. It's as if they are talking all the time, but we live with the radio on the wrong station. After the lightning, it looks like someone turned the dial. And now, I listen. Not with your ears, but with the heart. And what they always say is the same thing. You're not alone, and you never have been. This is what I need to tell you who are listening to my story right now. Death is not what they told you. It is not the end, nor punishment. It's just one open your eyes. For what he was always right in front of his people. If you asked me today, Rick, would you change anything? The answer would be straightforward. No, not for a second, because I needed to die, to wake up to life. Before the lightning, I lived on autopilot. I chased goals, paid bills, put out fires, internal and external, without ever stopping to ask, who am I, really? But now I know. I am consciousness. I am eternal. I am part of the source. And so are you. The biggest lie we have been told is that death is the end, that everything turns off, that we are just a body with a brain trying to survive. This is false. You are much more than flesh. You are light dressed in matter. It is a spark of the same love that built entire galaxies. It's just here, remembering this. After my experience, I started talking. At first it was difficult. I knew that many would call me crazy. A firefighter who claims to have floated on a river of divine energy, who saw consciences, who heard the voice of love. Yes, and you know what? I'm not bothered. Because if just one person, listening to what I experienced, manages to lose their fear of death, then it was all worth it. I started giving talks. I was invited to podcasts, support groups for the bereaved. A man wrote to me saying he would give up his life that night, but after watching my story, chose to continue. Another told me that he began to see his deceased son in dreams after he understood that the separation was only temporary. These things are priceless. Maybe that's my mission. Be a bridge, a reminder that there is something beyond, far beyond, and that we don't need to wait for death to live with conscience. Because deep down, heaven is already here. You just need to change your focus, turn off the noise, listen to the silence, and he will tell you the same thing they told me in that place. You already know. You always knew. You just forgot for a while. And now, it's time to remember. Today, when I look back, I don't see the tragedy of being struck by lightning. I see one sacred calling, a portal that opened in a second of chaos to show me a truth that millions spend their entire lives trying to understand, and few can see. It doesn't matter where you are now. It doesn't matter what you've lost, what you've suffered, or how much you think everything is over. I've been on the other side, and I came back. And not because I'm special, but why this message needed to reach you. Death is not darkness, it's not loneliness. She is living light, pulsating, intelligent. She is the return home. The hug that your soul forgot existed. And most importantly, you don't have to die to awaken. The truth is here. Now. In the touch of a hand. In the sunset you ignored yesterday. In the tears that flow for no reason. I don't shiver when I hear something that the soul recognizes before the mind. It's life screaming. You were never apart. You were never just a body. You never had to be afraid. I was split in two by lightning, literally. but went through this crack that something bigger entered. And now she lives inside, every day, in every breath. So, if you've gotten this far listening to me, this message isn't just mine. She is yours. Maybe you don't remember, but you already know this truth. She lives in the space between her thoughts, in the peace that comes when everything finally becomes silent. And when this body comes to an end, because it will, fear not. Just close your eyes and remember, you are eternal, you are light, and death is not what you think. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.